I tried a business of people could rent me out and I'd walk around on their back, hang off their back in a backpack, the cop on your back. So I'd be there all the time for them, but it didn't go over too well. It was too heavy.
Oh my goodness.
This doesn't work. What we say?
That's why we carry a gun, because a cop is just too heavy.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Necro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union.
This episode is brought to you by Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training, the makers of the SIRT pistol. Mike Hughes and Britt Lentz are rock stars, and you can be too if you train with a SIRT. TheGunfood.com, your online source for ammunition. Mountain Man Medical, the right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Meet the Pressers. I'm Matt Mallory, and this is my awesome guest co-host, Cheryl Todd. And we have a very special guest today, Erich Pratt from Gun Owners of America. Doing great things, sir. Hearing great things, doing great things. This is awesome.
So tell us a little bit, for those who are living under a rock, Erich, and haven't maybe heard of all of your accomplishments, what it is you do and what your organization does.
So I'm Senior Vice President of Gun Owners of America. I've been fighting for our Second Amendment rights for over 30 years. And that's really what we do. It's in the courts, in the Congress, sometimes in the executive White House. Obviously, this 4-year period that we're in is not going to make much difference. However much pressure we apply to the White House, but we're involved in the states as well. We have all the states covered with state directors. So, we're just, there's. I like to tell people that there's other groups that do other good things, and education and training and things like that. We especially, when we were founded, we especially saw that there was a need for a no compromise voice in Washington, D.C. And so that's why we're here, is to let legislators know that there are millions of gun owners who don't want them to give 1 inch. And we've actually been able to win a lot of battles with that message without saying, okay, you want to ban 100 guns, but we'll whittle it down to 50 and call it even. No, going at that rate, we will lose all our rights. So anyway, that's why GOA is here. That's what we do.
There's another Erich that just became a state leader for you guys down in Georgia.
Yes.
Yeah, I've done a lot with Eric Blandford, and record every time I'm down that way. I record, so I'm actually texting him a picture of us recording right now, just to say, hey, you know this guy?
Yeah, Ivy 8888, yep. Great guy. Really excited to have him on board with us.
Yeah, I saw that news brief or news PR, and I was like, that's awesome. That's good. He's definitely got he has the desire. I've spent many hours with him recording shows, both on his show and him being on ours. And he's a good guy. So you guys picked a good one there to champion the cause.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, and what I love is that GOA is a no compromise minded organization, because exactly what you said, Erich, is how the other side has continuously, incrementally moved that needle so far away from what our founders had envisioned for us. And, when our response is to honor their, the way you negotiate is you ask for more than what you want, hoping for something, right? And when our response is to be like, okay, what are we thinking? And some people think that, well, a no compromise group, that's just too hard of a stance. Actually, no, it's not, because that's exactly what's required. And I mean, you're a parent. You have
I was
like
thinking that exact same thing, just as you were saying that.
right? You have like 900 kids or something, right, Erich? So
close.
Oh,
so
goodness.
you know, you've got to think in those terms sometimes, where it's like, okay, I understand you want the cookie. I get that you want the cookie. I know the cookie's yummy, all the things, but the answer is still no, because the cookie is
Yeah.
not good for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you said what you said there, Cheryl, because it is very true that just being no compromise doesn't mean you have to do it with a snarl or be ugly about it. You can
Right.
do it with a smile, but what it means is, if you like what happened recently with the legislation that 15 senators and another 14 congressmen, Republicans, compromised. Actually, I can talk in a moment why it wasn't a compromise. It was a sellout. But, you know, they compromised. And so we lost that battle. I mean, it was heartbreaking because it's the first big battle we've lost at the national level in almost 3 decades.
Wow.
But, you know, at this point, so what do? Well, now we hold them accountable. You know, we are helping with picketing and protests at local offices for these senators. You know, I'm sure you guys saw how John Cornyn was booed at a Texas convention. We are generating.
Well, he should have been.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You know, we are mobilizing the grassroots to contact these almost 30 legislators and just let them know, you know, we're going to remember. You know, you may look at this as a slight, you know, infringement or a reasonable restriction, but we don't, and we're going to remember come November, or, you know, if your election's in 2 years, we're going to remember.
Locally here, John Katko is our yeah, our congressional member, and when he did all the voting for the impeachment and all that, we let him have it, so much so that he actually decided he's going to just get out of politics. He's actually not renewing, and he's not going to run again. Which, I mean, in one sense, it's bad because we don't know what we're going to get, and we're kind of on the edge of getting somebody. And it's like, do you keep somebody in who he's a rhino? That's what he is, or do you? His wife actually unfriended me on Facebook because I said, so who? I mean, I'm sorry, not his wife. A local judge's wife's ran his campaign. So she unfriended me because I asked her, she runs the local Republican committee. And I said, well, who do we got to replace him? We need to get him out. And she didn't like that. So I was like, okay, wow. It is what it is. Right. I mean, it's, right. we can't compromise in that sense. And he was a federal prosecutor prior to this. So it's like some of the stuff he was voting for, it's like, you know, that this wouldn't even hold muster in court, yet you're going with the tide because you know Trump's not going to be in office. So you want to make sure you got a place after the Republican Party's no longer in office. That's all it was. He's pandering to the crowd. It's really important that they feel the heat on this.
Yes.
Otherwise, if they don't, they will keep going for more. And anti-gun Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut was boasting before the vote. You guys on the Republican side, you're going to see, you're not going to get flack for this. And we're going to be able to pass more gun control later. So, I mean, it's really important that they do feel the heat. Otherwise, they will go for more later down the road. But I would just point this out. If it were true that what they passed was truly what the American people wanted, and that it was going to help legislators in the polls, then why is it that the president's numbers, and of course the president pushed for this, has touted this when he signed the legislation, why is it that the president's numbers haven't rebounded and he continues to sink? In other words, I mean, yeah, I get it. There's people out there who want gun control, but this is not the be all and end all that is going to rescue people. In fact, quite the contrary. Our own polling has found 78% of gun owners consider themselves single issue voters. So that means you go wrong on this one issue, and I will either sit home, I'll vote Libertarian, I'll vote for your opponent, but I'm not voting for you. So it's a real dangerous gambit that these almost 30, and you know, I'm glad to hear what you were saying about Katko. There's another representative, and his name escapes me right now, but it's the same kind of thing. He took so much incoming heat for his support for this latest gun control, he decided, you know what, I'm not even going to run for re-election. The heat's too hot. So that's good. We're nailing up scalps to show future Republicans don't mess with the Second Amendment.
Well, the thing is that not so long ago, I don't know about you, Matt, you look quite young, but
Thanks. I shave away the gray.
not so long ago, and I'm old enough to remember this, the Second Amendment was referred to as the third rail, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing you don't touch because it's gonna end your career, right? And so it needs to shift back that way. And it's sounding like, from what I'm hearing you two gentlemen talk about, that in New York, this has happened. And it was telling to me, Matt, that you didn't refer to him as your representative, right?
Yeah.
Because so many elected officials have lost sight of the fact that you have one job. It is to represent
the people,
your constituency.
For sure. Yeah, in New York, I mean, that's where I'm at, Eric. I don't know if you knew that, but with the CCIA that they just passed, it's lunacy. I just talked to DCGS this morning, trying to get some ideas on the training aspect, the 18 hours that they're going to put forth, and when they're going to have that curriculum done, and who's creating it, and do they dictate the cost, and who are the certified instructors? And DCGS to some extent doesn't even know the answer to all the questions, because it got dropped on their lap, just like the state troopers got the SAFE Act dropped on their lap back in 2013. It's reminiscent of the SAFE Act for sure.
Mm-hmm. And, it's almost worse in a sense, because we had a really good decision from the Supreme Court, and they rushed this into law to specifically counteract. Yeah, to spite the court.
Yep.
So all these new restrictions on concealed carry holders, like you were talking about, where you can carry. I mean, the Supreme Court said you can't turn all of Manhattan into a sensitive place. So basically, the New York law goes, line by line, saying, okay, this is a sensitive place. This, schools, entertainment places, private residences, private businesses. I mean, like virtually everything in the state is now a sensitive place. And, for any business not to be a sensitive place, they have to put up a sign that specifically, says your guns are welcome here. So anyway, this is one of the reasons why we immediately, our attorneys got to work, and we just filed 2 days ago a lawsuit challenging this. So
I'm so glad you did that, because that was my gut turned, and I had. Well, when the Supreme Court ruling came down, I probably had no less of 500-600 phone calls, emails, text messages, Facebook messages asking, does this mean I need a pistol license anymore? Can I walk out in public with my gun on my hip? I'm like, where did you read that? No, that has nothing to do. Well, first off, the Supreme Court sends it down to the lower court to redo their decision. Then they send it to the state, and the state changes the law. It doesn't happen immediately. And then a week later, we get New York State basically balking at what the Supreme Court did. And then I got another slew of people calling, what are we going to do? What's the recourse? I'm like, well, I hope somebody brings a lawsuit, because that's the only thing I can see prior to the election in November. And then in the election in November, kind of what you were alluding to earlier, I really, really hope that the Democrats in New York State realize that this governor does not, and all the other politicians that voted for the law, does not have good, legal, moral, prudent people's hearts and minds in their thought process. They're totally, definitely sensitive places. 20 sensitive places is pretty much makes New York State a no gun zone. You go outside your house, it's in your vehicle, on the road, and on a sidewalk that doesn't have a protest going on. If it's a protest, then it's illegal. And it's a felony, Class C felony.
Yeah, in our lawsuit, we actually said it would have been easier for the legislators to say where you can carry, because they went to such great extents to say all these places where you couldn't carry. By the way, our chief plaintiff, he's a refugee from the Ukraine. He fled because of tyranny there. And now he says he's seeing the same tyranny here in New York. I mean, how sad is that? the state of New York reminds immigrants of tyranny in their home country. So anyway, he's our chief plaintiff. We're happy to have him. And given the position of the Supreme Court with the Bruin decision, we're very hopeful that we're going to be successful in this.
Do you feel that we'll get a stay on it in a lower court because they don't want it to go to the Supreme Court because they see the writing on the wall? Is that where our hope is?
Yeah, I won't bet on it, but just in private conversations, I've opined the same idea that and there's precedent for that, as you're probably aware. When we won in DC, and a judge basically ruled that DC had to be a shall issue jurisdiction. This was a few years ago. DC was wanting to appeal it to the Supreme Court, take it higher. And they got calls from Democrat attorney generals from all over the country saying, don't appeal it, because if we lose, then, we're going to get stuck. Because, they knew with the current court makeup that existed at the time that they were probably going to lose. Basically, they would have ended up with a Bruin the Bruin decision just a few years earlier. So there's precedent for this where the bad guys decide, let's not appeal this so that we don't make a situation worse for them. We'll see.
And how do you find your plaintiffs? Do they come to you? Do you have people that just happen to know these plaintiffs? How does that happen?
Well, we've got an extensive network, and so it's kind of a combination of all the above. But it really helps to have just people who are active at the state level. And myself personally, I'm not the ones involved in finally deciding who it is, but I think this guy's is a winner. I mean, he's a GOA member. And just incredible story. Ivan, I can't pronounce his last name. I did mention he's from the Ukraine.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, I would probably butcher it myself, so I'm not even going to try. And I printed out a press release that you guys put out just a few days ago that you are suing Biden's ATF over the ghost gun rule. Let's dive into that one. What's that all about?
So, this rule restricts your ability to make guns at home. So 80% kits would have to go through background checks. Look, this is restricting and demonizing an activity that's been done in this country since the beginning of our republic.
Yep.
Probably the biggest aspect to this, because some people may think, that's not my thing. I don't make guns at home. The thing that people should be worried about, if that's not their quote unquote thing, besides the hit to freedom, but the thing that really is concerning is that this takes a huge step towards universal gun owner registration by repealing the ability of gun dealers to get rid of their 4473 forms after 20 years. And this just feeds into, you may remember earlier this year, it was discovered through a Freedom of Information Act that the ATF has compiled almost 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion gun owner records. And almost 900 million of them are digitized. So this is just another step in that direction where now dealers, originally under the law, they were able to dispose of 4473 forms after 20 years. Now, under this rule, they're not allowed to do that. And so eventually those 4473 forms with your name, your address, the type of gun you bought, your social security number, all that private information will one day eventually get to the ATF. So that's very concerning. And so anyway, that's of course, two of the many reasons why we decided we just absolutely had to challenge them on this in court.
I don't want to give them any ideas, but hopefully they don't want to spite the court ruling when the Supreme Court shoots them down like California did with the Bruin case, right? Where they released all the concealed carry. They basically doxed everybody in California that has a concealed carry license.
Yeah. Oops. I mean, and this just shows the problems with not only with registration, but with background checks. because you're giving over that, all
Sensitive
this information. I was just speaking somewhere, and then, it was overall a conservative group, but even in that group, I could see there were people that, what's wrong with a background check? And of course, if anybody is thinking that, if you're thinking, oh, well, background checks are needed in order to stop bad guys from getting guns. First of all, they don't stop bad guys from getting guns, because bad guys are lawbreakers. They will either use a fake ID, they will use a straw buyer, or they will steal it, or they will make it. Hey, like the guy in Japan, right? He made his
the shotgun.
He didn't even 3D print it. I mean, he just made it with like tubes and
2 pipes and some
pipes and duct tape, which keeps the world together, right? So bad guys are going to do bad things. And by the way, background checks, 95% of the denials are false positives, because they're people who shouldn't be stopped, people with the same names or similar birthday. Yeah. So the only thing that background checks really are effective in doing is compiling information on good people. And so, and even if you take a step back, just one more aspect to this, just fundamentally, it's misguided to put good, innocent people in the position to ask permission in order to exercise a God-given right, to exercise a right that's protected by the Bill of Rights. We shouldn't have to be asking for permission. And so it just leads to a whole host of problems.
So on that mention, I'm a type 7 FFL, and New York State in this new law, they just basically delegated it, and they've taken away our ability to do the background checks. Now we got to do it, send it to the state troopers who are going to do the background check, and they charge the fee, and we're not able to upcharge at all. So we basically have to do background checks for free. From my understanding, I could be off. I didn't completely read it, but that's what I'm hearing with the mumbling and stuff going on. So it's like, now I know some states do that. They don't use the NICS database. They use their own local database, which you'd think that anything government's, probably done, shoddy anyways. But in this case, now you got the state handling it, New York State handling it.
Well, and since it seems like, Erich, you have such an affinity and an admiration and a love for the ATF, as I share with you, and the sarcasm is dripping all over my screen right now. What are your thoughts on the confirmation of Dettelbach?
Stephen Dettelbach, he's just as bad as the previous nominee. This is obviously going to be a problem. I mean, he's anti-gun through and through. And so we can just expect, we can expect to see a lot of mischief. I mean, already, even without him there, we're seeing gun dealers at a rate 500% increase being shut down by the ATF for, just inconsequential mistakes and, paperwork errors and things like that. I don't expect, obviously, any leniency. I mean, if the only director that we would support would be somebody who would go in there and really rein them in. Steve Dettelbach's not going to do that.
Well, at least you didn't say he's far worse than the last nominee.
Could you be worse? I don't know if you could be worse.
That would be hard to do.
It's so true.
Oh my goodness.
And you mentioned, Erich, that you've been in this conversation. I find myself hesitating to use the word fight and battle because of how the other side takes our words and twists them around. But you've been in this conversation from birth. Your dad was in this conversation. I don't know if you have siblings. Do you have siblings, or
I do.
Are you all shoulder to shoulder on this? How has that played out in your family dynamic?
Yeah, he raised very pro-gun children. And certain, being the oldest, he gifted me my first gun when I was a teenager, and I didn't run to a school and shoot it up. Isn't that
Go
amazing,
figure,
right?
right?
Yeah, that was back in a day when teenagers would take hunting
Right.
rifles to school, lock them in their trucks, and then go hunting afterwards. And it just tells you that there's been quite a change in our society and the moral fabric. But anyway, no, my father is one of the guys who I admire the most on the planet, and he was just such an inspiration for me in doing this job. One of the things we're talking about the no compromise attitude. He just exemplified that, because I remember this just growing up, having these conversations around the table, to when I actually entered the workforce and came to work here at GOA. He's the nicest, sweetest man, and yet he is uncompromising and will not budge on principle, to the point where there were times, and I remember distinctly back in the 90s as I was working with him, sometimes we were almost a lone voice at the national level on certain things like constitutional carry. There was another national group that was opposing that. It's funny. One of the guys, a guy I know, I've met him a couple times. He was in the gun industry and he's retired, but he was being interviewed by a real liberal magazine, and they were trying to do a hit piece on my dad. But they asked him, so what's your thinking about Larry? And it was kind of a backhanded compliment, like, Larry, he is always like so far out there, which of course means he's standing on the Constitution. But right. So this is a pro-gun guy, pro-gun from the gun industry. He's always so far out there. But then I would always find, like, 5 years later, I was agreeing with him on whatever particular issue.
He was way ahead of his time, right?
Exactly. And it's easy to do in one sense if you're standing on the Constitution and you're standing on principle. And that's what I saw him doing. And so rather than, buckling, he would stand. And eventually I've had many people tell me, I thought you guys were so radical opposing background checks. We're just talking about background checks. People have told us, I thought GOA was way out there on that, but now I've seen how they abuse it, doxing gun owners, registering, and now I agree with you. There shouldn't be background checks. So anyway, I really appreciate him just for his stand on principle, and that's awesome. Just been a huge inspiration to me.
And my dad did a lot of hunting and stuff with my dad when I was a kid, and then transitioned to him not hunting as much because of physical stuff. But fast forward all these years later, it was probably about 7-8 years ago, I taught the handgun safety course at his house for him and a bunch of his friends, and he got his pistol license, and I taught him how to shoot a handgun. So it was kind of full circle, So nice. I share those neat times with our fathers.
Yes,
well, I love that. And there's a picture that Jeff Knox, whose father is Neil Knox, big in the NRA world, posted one day, and it was Larry Pratt, your dad, Erich. It was Jeff Knox's dad, Neil Knox, and my father-in-law. So, because here in the state of Arizona, my father-in-law was, one of our biggest, loudest voices. And it's so interesting that here my husband and I are now doing this work. But when my husband was younger, he just kind of felt like, well, that's something dad does. And, it's so awesome that with Jeff Knox and with the Pratts, there was more of that togetherness all the way through. And, when mom does something, kind of the whole family does. So now that I'm involved, I kind of, we've got the whole brood, understanding our history and respecting those whose shoulders we stand on. And, but I just love that. And then Matt, you talking about, you and your dad and that legacy, and it really does come down to the kitchen table. Don't you think?
For sure.
Yeah. It's too bad Father's Day already passed. This would be a great Father's Day episode.
It would be. And I'm not saving it for next year. The content's too good. We got to get it out there. So let's circle back around to the New York lawsuit. And the three things that scare or that bother me the most, and let me know if you know if you guys are going to be posing any more suits, or if the one that you guys already have covered this at all. But obviously the social media one, we know that's part of it. You did cover that because it's trampling on the First Amendment. The proper cause, where they got rid of proper cause, but now they're bait and switch, changed the name of it.
Right.
And under that, now they're doing all the sensitive locations. Those are the three things. I mean, the training is, I don't think the Supreme Court's going to rule that the training's too egregious. I think they're going to, that's just going to be something that they won't even cover, because they've already said that it's fine for the state to put training forth, even though that will be the largest amount of training required in the entire United States, is what New York just imposed at 18 hours. I think, was it DC and Illinois have 16 hours of training, if I'm not mistaken. Everybody else is 16 or less. New York's going to have the most, which we're a trendsetter in New York. But the social media aspect, that suit does cover that. Proper cause, sensitive locations. Thoughts on that? Does your suit cover any of that, or do you have another one coming forward that you?
Yes, it covers all three of those things you mentioned. Perfect. And we did also take on the training. Okay. And you're probably right in one sense about the Supreme Court. On the other hand, they did address how some states, which even have a shall issue, how they take excessive amounts of time, and I forget the word they use. It was something akin to it's an oppressive or abusive. That's what they said. It's an abusive process. And so we took that aspect and said, look, I mean, if there's no greater example than this of an abusive process, where they've upped the hours, they've upped the cost that is going to be related, that people are going to have to fork out for all this training. And so anyway, we hit all four of those topics.
Perfect. Yeah, the cost thing, I was figuring it out in my head, like, what would I charge if I had a charge for a course like this? And I have a standard $10 or $20 per hour based on if it's just a classroom lecture, or if it's a live fire on the range, or instructor certification or something. And that running a gun and ammo, I'm looking at like $350 a person I'd have to charge to be able to, and that's not competitive, nor is it. It's New York City. That's what they're charging now. It costs, $400 to get your pistol license in New York City, if you can get one. And there's no refunds. So that's why a lot of people don't do it too.
We mentioned in our lawsuit, the average would probably be around $400. So we're right in line with what you're saying.
It's a tremendous expense and a tremendous burden on a family's budget. And here in Arizona, we ran the AZCDL. I'm on the board of that. We supported a bill that was being presented, saying that these are life-saving tools, so we shouldn't have to be paying sales tax on those. Right? There's a lot of life-saving tools. That's a good point. Right? So alleviate that that burden. Yeah. And even one of our staunchest Republicans needed a little extra conversation about it, because she's like, well, if those taxes are supporting things that I value, then which way do I go? And I say, well, especially now, think of your lowest socioeconomic constituent and the burden that inflation is placing on them.
That's a good point.
And who do you represent? You represent your constituents, not where your taxes go. And it seemed to make a difference for how she was weighing things out. But I appreciated the question. Yeah.
How about what the governor said in support of the law? It was just so outrageous. Remember, she was asked
which thing
you're right. Oh, there's so many. But I just had to laugh when she was asked if she had the numbers to show that it was concealed carry holders who were committing the crimes, which was a great question. But her answer was, I don't need to have the numbers. In other words, hey, I've got my mind made up, and
And what are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
The Supreme Court can't stop me, right? She, in her mind, she's thinking the Supreme Court can't stop me. They've ruled. We've gotten rid of it. We changed it. So now we got to be sued again. There's no bite. There's no teeth. That's my biggest thing, is the way that they ruled. The state should be like, okay, all right, we took a loss. Let's just do what they say and move on. But no, she went full it's full circle. And I'm hoping that that right there makes people in New York State, even the Democrats, say, this lady's lost her mind. Like, numbers. We don't need no stinking numbers, right? Come on, lady. It's ridiculous.
Well, and so often, having an intelligent and articulate argument is kind of, sometimes that's where our strength is. But the other side, all they want to do is have their own way, or, lean into the feels. But I'm going to take that moment to just kind of promote and talk about this awesome book written by our awesome guest, Erich Pratt. And it's called Firing Back: How to Counter. And that's the thing. We've got to be able to counter even when they don't want to hear it. Even when they say, we don't need no stinking numbers, right? How to counter those anti-gun propaganda and become a better 2A activist.
That's awesome.
And it's just a tremendous book, and it kind of talks a little bit about your family history that I don't think
It does.
a lot of people know about. Erich, talk to us about that little bit of family history that leads us to Cuba. Is it? Am I right?
Panama.
Panama.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm half Panamanian, and Spanish was my first language, which we spoke in the home. Is probably a little known fact that a lot of people don't know about my dad is he's very fluent in Spanish, a guy from New Jersey, right?
Wow.
But he wasn't when he got married to my mom, but they spoke it in the house, and that's what I grew up speaking. But anyway, she's from a political family. My great-grandfather, which was her grandfather, signed the Panamanian Declaration of Independence when they broke from Colombia in 1903. Wow. And anyway, back in the 60s, her uncle, who was my great uncle, was running for president, and she even took me down there. I was just a wee little lad then, but took me down there, and she was helping campaign for him, and he won his race. He was the president of the country. How exciting for the family, right?
Awesome.
Except that he was only president for a couple of weeks because a military coup took over the presidency.
Oh, wow.
And, it was that way for a little over 20 years until Bush, the first Bush, sent a liberating force. But anyway, the point that, you're getting at, Cheryl, obviously having free elections is not enough. The Panamanians at the time had a saying, this land is not fertile soil for tyranny. But, it's not enough just to have free elections or just think, oh, something like this could never happen. You've got to have firearms, and the people have to be armed, because if the government has most of the guns, then you're always this close from tyranny. So, we've, experienced that in our own family. I mean, I've seen that up close. From my dad, I got the other aspect when back in the 60s, he wasn't into, in fact, he was a recovering liberal, really. So, he wasn't into guns or anything, but during the 68 riots, he heard the police chief in Washington, D.C. say, if the rioters spread into, down the arteries and into the suburbs, we're not going to be able to contain it. And it was the first time he ever considered, wait, what? My government may not be able to protect me, like, hello, Uvalde, Texas, right? My government may not be. And so he took me with him, and I actually distinctly remember being at the gun shop. He bought a shotgun. Joe Biden would be excited. He bought a shotgun. That was the first gun. Yeah, right. He's never used it like that, though. First gun we had in the home. He bought it before the 68 Act. So no 4473 form or anything like that on it. It's clear and free. So anyway, that's just a little bit from both sides of the family.
And it's been lost. It's been lost in the lake ever since, right? So
that's right. A horrid boating accident.
Terrible. Well, and the thing is with the, the fact that your dad was a recovering liberal, very often our most powerful voices have come from places where they've been just completely oppressed. And so if your dad hadn't have had that experience And then coupled with what happened on your mom's side of the family, maybe he would have just been, I don't know what his other trade was before he became the Larry Pratt that we know, but he probably would have just continued being that person. And I never would have thought I would be a national activist and advocate for the Second Amendment. But during the Obama administration, being a gun store owner, I was constantly hearing who I was being vilified on the nightly news. You know, I'm just a mom, I'm just a wife, I'm just a business owner. I happen to sell firearms. And I was, you know, sitting at the right hand of Satan, you would think.
Yeah.
You know, if you listen to the way that Obama and the news parrots, right, were talking about me. And I felt like I needed my side of the story to be told.
Yes. I same exact thing with teaching classes. When I just thought when I was starting to teach classes 10, 12 years ago, when I started professionally, that it would just be me teaching gun safety. And then it turned into so much more political in the sense where people are like, well, what do we got to do? Well, you got to go do this. You got to do that. We got to do all that. Really? I thought we just took a course and that was it. I'm like, well, yeah, but you got to get approval. What? We got to get approval. And then of course I point to the Second Amendment and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't say approval anywhere, right? I mean, but
well said.
It does say well regulated, which is training. I just don't like the government telling us that we have to be trained. But if you know, then there's double-edged sword. If you don't tell them they got to do it and make them do it, they ain't going to do it. That's the lazy society we live in, right?
Well, I would say no, because
No?
Some people are lazy, but here in Arizona, we've had constitutional carry for many years now. And we still have plenty of very well-skilled trainers who are being kept in business by people who have taken it upon themselves to go ahead and get the training that they're not required to get, and even get a concealed carry license that they are not required to get.
Oh, that's good to know.
Erich, what else do we need to know about the awesome work that GOA is doing in every single one of our 50 states?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on, obviously, federal wise. You know, the Republicans selling out thought that they would put the issue behind them. But now come to find out that that was just a stepping stone for more. And so there's already calls for more gun legislation, and they want to try to bring up a ban on AR-15s and other semi-automatic firearms. And so, yeah, it's going to be a constant battle for the next, you know, however, 6 months, 5 months to the election. It's going to be a constant battle to that day, trying to fend them off. And then, you know, Katie, bar the door, because once we get a new Congress, there's already people who are lining up to introduce a repeal of what just passed. And, you know, sometimes these little defeats can wind up to be a huge thing. I mean, think about what happened in '94, where they passed the Brady law, they passed the semi-auto ban. And as a result, Democrats, especially anti-gun Democrats, got hammered in that election. And President Clinton lamented several times that it was the gun control that he signed, that Congress passed, that cost him control of the Congress. So, you know, a lot of time, and by the way, in saying that, I'm not saying the Republicans were the saviors in any way, but it was good that those that had voted against our rights got held accountable. And that's what was key. I mean, I remember lobbying the halls of Congress back in '94, and one legislator who ended up voting for the gun ban laughed in my face when I said that, you know, I'm seeing there's real unrest in the hustings, and there could be big consequences. I mean, I was kind of going on a limb because, quite frankly, we hadn't seen anything like that for 40 years, right? Yeah. Because just Democrats kept control of the Congress year after year after year. But I said, I'm seeing real unrest, even among Democrats. And he laughed at me. He was one of the legislators who was voted out as a result of his gun control vote. So, you know, it's really important.
Who's laughing now?
Who's laughing now? That's right. That's right? Exactly right. Representative Gilchrist is another one. He got voted out as well, and he wrote an op-ed a few years back, and he said, I think it was may have been the New York Times or something like that, but he said he had no idea what a hot button issue that was going to be. And sure enough, I mean, the pollsters always try to make it sound like, oh, the American people want this. In fact, interestingly, the New York Times even had an article on this recently where they said, in their mind, the American people want these restrictions, but they don't vote that way. And I'm not sure I agree with the first part necessarily, but the second part is definitely true. And, it's been 30 years since there was a political come to Jesus moment for these guys who defied the Second Amendment. And, maybe it's just time that they need another reminder, and so anyway, I think that's really the key here, is that we just, and by the way, we've printed their names on our website. So if you go to gunowners.org, you can see the articles where we deal with what happened after the vote, so that you can see, who these people are that need to be tossed and new people voted in.
They touch one of those rails like Cheryl was mentioned about earlier, and he got bit.
That's right.
And as you've mentioned a couple of times about this sellout group of Republicans, we can't just wander in to the polling booth and go, oh, well, I'm just going to check all the R's because that's going to protect my rights. Mm-hmm. We cannot afford to do that. We have to be mentoring up good constitutional based people who truly want to represent. They want to be public servants, and then ushering them in with, helping them get elected, and then holding them accountable.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
And so with the work that you're doing at GOA, how does the average person help with that? The work you're doing and suing the Biden administration, this all has to take money. How do we help with that?
Well, yeah, it does, because the attorneys don't work for free, and they have to feed their families. And I'm not an attorney, but we've got really good attorneys. We're very thankful for them. But yeah, if you go to our website, I will say this, even before that, and certainly, yes, I mean, we do need we're very thankful for our members and those who contribute to the work that we do. The biggest thing that our members do, though, is just by signing up on our website for free email alerts, because that's really where that's what generates the loud voice. And even though we lost this last battle, leading up to the vote, the thing that we kept hearing about was that GOA members were making such a loud noise that we were hearing from several offices that all the senators really wanted to know is what's GOA's opinion on the matter. And, I will say there were some Republican senators who surprised me by voting against the legislation. And that's just an indication that there was a loud echo chamber from our members contacting them. I mean, honestly, the vote probably should have been worse against us, except for the fact that there were just so many people calling. I mean, thousands of people calling these offices, over 100,000 emails and letters going in, just that we were able to track into the Senate. So I mean, this was very powerful, and that's the kind of thing that just being, following us, getting our emails makes such a huge difference. So again, that's at gunowners.org. And it's free to sign up for our emails. We don't spam you. We just need your voice. And literally, it takes just a few seconds. When we send an email, you click on the take action button, and then you click on the send button, and your pre-written emails or letters go to your legislators. And, if you want to look at them and say, I'd like to tweak this or make it stronger, or whatever. I mean, people do that too. And you're able to do that before you send it. But if you're short on time, just 2 or 3 clicks of your mouse and bam, you've sent off a letter. That's very effective and very needed.
So communicate with your politicians, and you guys make that easy, which is phenomenal because a lot of people don't know, the right way to talk to them or the right way to get the message across. You guys really put that in a nice, concise way to get that point across in a professional, but also very poignant way to do such.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. I try to do that with Albany. Go down to Albany and talk to the politicians when they let me in. Usually they do, but since COVID, they're using that as an excuse to not have a meeting. But awesome, sir. Well, I'm definitely going to be joining, and I'm gonna parrot that. I'm gonna get on my soapbox and let other people know, because you guys are doing great things, and we need to support good organizations like yours to be able to allow you to keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Matt. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. Thank you guys for to both of you for helping spread the word and educate people. That's very important.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much. And I think everybody needs to get a copy of this book because it really is rich with history and current information and some great ways to get your own thoughts in order. When I started, doing radio and podcast, I felt like I know what I believe, but then articulating it sometimes, I needed other people's words in my vocabulary.
Definitely.
And this is a great way to do it. Is this an Amazon or is this a GOA website?
It's available through the gunowners.org website. Yeah.
And just so happens on the back, I got to write a little endorsement.
We have some great endorsers on the back. Yes. Thank you, Cheryl.
That's awesome.
Thank you for asking me. So, all right. Well, thanks so much. This has been amazing. And please keep up the work you're doing. It is saving our republic. Literally. Well, I don't overstate that.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.
Stay safe, sir. Thanks for coming on.
There's a lot of sponsors to make this show possible, like Mantis.
Make sure you check them out and give them your business.
This episode is brought to you by Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Next Level Training, the makers of the SIRT pistol. TheGunFood.com, your online source for ammunition. Mountain Man Medical, the right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening to our show.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, click that little bell thingy so you know when the next episode's uploaded. Support us on Patreon. Come to one of our classes. Host us to come to you and do one of our classes at your location.
And until next time,
adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.